Yeah.
sport in general can be to bringing the community together, uniting the community and taking it forward. One of my first jobs in the Olympic movement, which was at the agency. And the job I had at the agency, scout and then sign Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes for visa. I was part of an organization that had just won the bid. It
Yeah.
was like being part of a startup. I think that sport is one of the few things that can bring people who typically don't come together to come together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women in Sport powered by WordsWork and the Global Institute of Sports Business. Today, we have with us, all the way from California, Ms. Zaileen Janmohamed. She has been a veteran of sports and the business of sports since the past 18 years. Having been a professional athlete herself beforehand, she got into the business side of sports quite early in life and worked on very prestigious activities, including sponsorships as well as working on LA28, till recently when she became the CEO and president of the Bay Area Host Committee in California. Her role is very interesting. It talks about how you bring economies into sporting events and how to make it integrate into the local culture of a particular space. With the recently concluded Olympics, this becomes very relevant for us to understand as well. And I really look forward to this conversation with her. So I have with us today Zaileen Janmohamed, who's currently the CEO and president of the Bay Area Host Committee. Zaileen, we're so happy to have you with us. Thank you for joining our podcast.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Super. So, what we do here is we like to champion women who are in the business of sports and who understand sports as an industry beyond, of course, the obvious athletes who form this industry. But the idea was to share the kind of experiences amazing women like you have had over the years. You've had over 18 years of very rich experience across different roles. So we're going to dive a bit into that and then, of course, come down to what you're currently doing, which is really exciting. But if I were to dial it back a bit, when did you start thinking about sports as a career? How did this happen? Was it an accident or was it very planned?
I mean, first of all, the fact that you and I are having this conversation, two Indian women around sport, I cannot believe that this is what's happening right now, because when I started, this was a little bit of a dream. This having Indian women in sport, managing sport, talking about sport was something that I didn't even think was possible. I don't think that me getting into sport was an accident per se, because I grew up I loved sport. I played lots of different types of sports. I snuck out of the house to play sports because my parents, I was an Indian daughter in a
Yeah.
country that they had just moved to, and they had a lot of, fear around, the proper, how to protect their daughter.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And and that's normal. I understand why that happened when they moved. But I was very persistent and was like, I knew what I loved. And when you know what you love, you will find ways to do it. And so I played a lot of sports and ended up doing like coaching and refereeing and managing. So I could already see that, it was part of who I was as a person. I just loved all aspects of it. And so when it became time to go to university and choose, a vocation or an area of study, I chose sport. And so my undergraduate degree was in kinesiology. It was on the science side of sport. So all about strength and conditioning and function and athletic training and physical therapy, all of that side in the first kind of 4 years of me thinking about what do I want to do with the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, I met my now husband, then boyfriend, and he was like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I was like, "I think this is it." And he's like, "You don't even understand the industry that sits in front of you,
Yeah.
in the US or around the world." And so I started to look into this area of sport business and sport management. And I did a graduate degree at the University of Massachusetts. And then, I want to say that just the world opened up for me once I did that degree. I started my career at Major League Soccer. I did a couple of years there. I went to a sports marketing agency, did a lot of work in the Olympic movement,
Yeah.
then went to Visa, was there for 5 or 6 years, came back to the sports marketing agency, then worked for LA 28, so the Olympic and Paralympic Games that will happen next after Paris, and now in this position. So I don't think it was I stumbled. I think I knew what I was passionate about. Did I know which organization, or did I know what was coming after? I didn't know. I didn't even plan. I just followed a little bit of instinct and said, what feels right to me as the next stage of my career, and then let fate, let fate almost a little bit take me to the next step.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting because you went from a fairly technical side of the industry to a more management-oriented role. And then, of course, all your work experiences sound really incredible. But I want to pin out the Olympic side of things. And what was your involvement there? Because we are in the middle of the Olympics right now as we speak. And I think it takes a lot for a country to bid for the Olympics and then finally get it and run it. So which part of that process were you part of, and what kind of insights did you have after that?
The most fun part, or interesting part of my Olympic experience, and I've worked in the Olympic movement in different jobs, probably for 10 to 12, maybe more years. The best part for me in the career that I've had was actually one of my first jobs in the Olympic movement, which was at the agency. And the job I had at the agency was to scout, and then sign Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes for visa. So my job was to look at all of the athletes around the world, understand who they were as people, how technically good they were, if they were going to medal, all of the little factors that I was looking at, and then recommend to my client, here's who we should sign, and if they agreed, going and signing those athletes. And what I loved, it was an amazing job, because for those that follow the Olympics closely, you know that Olympians are just a different breed of people. And I was so humbled by how they trained, what they did, how much they sacrificed to get where they wanted to ultimately be for not a lot of money. Like, they did it for their love of sport. And honestly, that job made me fall in love with the Olympics. Like, I then stayed in the Olympics for so long because I had access to the very core of what that movement is about, which is the athletes that play. So that was actually the best part of the entire Olympic career that I had. When I was at LA 28, it was actually really cool. Like, I was already in love with the Olympics, so it was an easy job for me to take. But I was part of an organization that had just won the bid. So they had just
It
received
was
this,
all
like,
new at that point in time.
all new. It
Yeah.
was like being part of a startup in a city that had an expectation and almost a responsibility, because they had hosted a games in 1984,
Did?
to do it like nobody else. And so there was like pressure, but also this, like, almost like this white canvas of like, what can we do? And I love when there's a white canvas. I love when people say, use your brain and your creativity. I'm not going to put any rules on you.
You like to have a blank canvas, which I completely agree with. And funnily enough, I was working briefly in London in a very structured setup of an agency. And then when I came back, a big part of me getting into the startup space within the field of sports communications was because it was a blank slate at that point in time as well. So I completely understand where you're coming from. So it felt like a startup, it was a blank slate. And then what came after that for you?
For me, in that role, when I was at LA 28, I was responsible for coming up with new monetization opportunities, new ways to drive revenue, new ways to connect with athletes. And so and I was in a time in my career, pretty senior, where there was not a lot of oversight. And so one of the things that we were able to do was we built a fully new technological platform for athletes to interact and intersect with brands, for sponsorship or small social media opportunities, and then receive payment. And the reason we did that was, number one, brands, and I had been in this experience, brands had not could not find all of the Olympic athletes that exist. There's so many of them. And number two, only 5% of all Olympic athletes actually make money. So we were trying to figure out, like, how do we disperse funding through most of the Olympic athletes in a very technologically and innovative way. And so that was something that we were able to create and launch. That product still exists today. And what it showed me, Neha, it was a really good precursor to the job I had today. Because the job I have today has never been done before, right? 3 events in 18 months, 2 of which are a Super Bowl and a World Cup in 1 year, which no one has ever done this before. And for a lot of people, that can be not only scary, but debilitating, right? You don't even know where to start. And I'm not saying that I don't get scared a few times. I do. It feels, right? It feels daunting. There are days when I'm like, oh, this is a big deal. This is hard. But I'm not afraid of hard things, right? And I can find ways every day to get a little bit closer to the end goal and get a little bit closer to the end goal. And I rely on the experience I've had, definitely in my last job, to say, hey, I've done this before. I know how to do hard things. This is just part of the process to get to the end. And so I rely a lot on that experience to
I'm
help
sure.
me this
I'm
next
sure.
one.
I think it's a lot of work experience that goes a long way to be able to do the kind of challenging things you do. And I think the education kind of lays down that foundation as well. And you seem to be one of the few people who has had that purposeful education within this area. And that's pretty much what we are also trying to do over here. You know, when I am looking at people who work with me, a lot of them have learned on the job vis-a-vis people who've had that kind of formal training. And then that coupled with work experience leads them to be able to do a lot more. So when it came down to your current role at the Bay Area, and I know the area has been challenged. I was there recently. So I know there are a lot of challenges economically, socially that did come up, especially during and post the pandemic. So are you saying that, and I would imagine this, that sports can be that one big driver, sports and culture, of course, can be that one big driver, obviously economically, but more so from that perspective of just bringing it back to where it was, or at least taking it in that direction of being in a very positive space?
Yeah. I think that sport is one of the few things, maybe you can add music, but one of the really few things that can bring people who typically don't come together to come together.
Yeah.
And you see it when you're watching the Euros, how people are filling the stadium and watching all over the world with their jerseys on and yelling, and you don't even think that these two people, or hundreds of people, would actually see eye to eye on anything else. Sport can bring people together. And so, in a time in the Bay Area, to your point, that has gone through a pretty rough period around COVID, understanding that sport is really key to this region. Like, we are huge sports fans in this region. We have great teams,
Yeah.
and we see it when these teams are successful, when these teams do things in the community comes together. And so our job with the Bay Area Host Committee is to take something that we already believe to be true, because we've seen it, and
Hmm.
use sport to bring the communities together. And you can see it already in how my board of directors functions and exists, right? So my board of directors is comprised of all of the presidents and leadership of the Bay Area professional sports teams. So the president of the Niners and the Warriors and the CEO of the Giants, all of them sit on my board of directors. In any other scenario, you would not have the presidents of all these teams come
Come
together
together. It's very rare. It's very rare. But I
because
think it's
they're
that common
competitive.
purpose that they're trying to come together for, and they see how important it is, right?
They see how important sport can be. It doesn't matter which sport,
Yeah.
sport in general can be to bringing the community together, uniting the community, and taking it forward. And what I want is, uh, after a period of time where the Bay has felt so down, attacked, the media perception hasn't been great. There's a lot of pride in this community. There has been a lot of pride in this community. I want these events to give people who live here the opportunity to pick their head up and to be like, that's us. We did this. We were able to do this. We were able to do something that nobody else could do. And it just gives people a little bit more pride and an opportunity to come together and say, yeah, this is who we are.
Super. And tell me, how has the last year or two been? You've seen it's been very busy and you've had massive events happening. So, when it comes to being a host committee, what is the typical role that you play to bring events into the space? And what are the different channels that you need to consider then when you're bringing events to the space, right from this process of getting the event to actually executing it on ground?
It is such an interesting part of the sports industry that honestly, like before I got into this position, I don't know if I fully understood the role of a sports commission or a host committee. So the host committee, they host committees or sports commissions exist all around the world. There's a number in the United States, and their role is twofold, really. The first is to understand what what sporting events or entertainment events exist that they can potentially bid for, and selecting the ones that they think will have the most impact to their region and bidding for those. So they are the official bidder in usually very typical competitive process to get events here. If they win, their role then is to execute those events. And so execution of those events, right, means that you are the local expert between, let's talk about FIFA, between FIFA and the local market on how that event should happen in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So I'm responsible for taking, hundreds of pages from FIFA on like requirements about the field, requirements around safety, requirements around legacy, requirements around government relations, and saying, okay, here's all the things that I'm supposed to do. Here's how I'm going to do it in the Bay Area. So my role can be one day sitting down with the mayors across the 9 counties
Yeah.
and having a conversation with all of the individual government stakeholders. The next day I might be talking to the 27 transportation agencies. The next day I might be talking to police and fire. The next day I might be talking to FIFA and the NFL about how much we've progressed. And the next day I might be talking to sponsors. And so every day, number one is different. And
Yeah.
number two is like, so it's like putting a 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, trying to put it together. You have all the pieces, you kind of know, you can see what has to be done, but it's a hard puzzle, right, to fit everything
Got
in
to
the
get
right spot.
into it and then do it on a day-to-day basis as well, I'm sure.
That's right.
How much of a lead time does it take? I mean, these are massive events, and I believe the FIFA World Cup at some point is also coming down to the Bay Area. So
That's right.
that's massive, right? And even what you've talked about of late, but how much time does it really take? And I can see a lot of effort goes into it, but it also takes a lot of time to sort of backtrack this out and do it in a proper way.
Yeah, so let's walk through the 3 events that are in the Bay, right?
Okay.
So next February, we have the NBA All-Star Game. That'll be at between Chase Center and Oakland Arena in February of 2025. Then in February of 2026, we have the Super Bowl. That will be between San Francisco and where the stadium is in Santa Clara. And then in the summer of 2026, so less than 6 months later, we will have the FIFA World Cup, mostly in the South Bay in Santa Clara, but with extensions through the Bay Area.
Right.
So if you think about the timeline, typically big, large scale events need about at least a 2-year timeline
Yeah.
to figure out all of the different puzzle pieces and how they're going to work together. The NFL and the NBA, because they do this every year in this market, they have a pretty, they know their operating model. They have like
They have the systems in place where they
they
just
have the
can
systems in
play
place.
safe
They
process.
have a team.
Mm.
They all, the Warriors and the 49ers exist here. So they have contacts already on, how does the market work? Can I pull in a resource from the team? So they already have the systems and the knowledge of the marketplace to move with a little bit of pace and know-how
Right.
against their timeline. The FIFA World Cup hasn't been here since 1994. So and the market has changed so much, and FIFA has changed so much, right? So that one, and there's 11 cities in the United States, 16 in total, 11 cities in the United States that are going to host the FIFA World Cup. So that one is, obviously more challenging because it's a bigger tournament. It's longer. It's trying to coordinate with 15 other cities. So like they want, as they should, the experience to be very consistent. If you go to a match in Kansas City and then you go to LA and then you go to San Francisco, it should feel somewhat similar. You know, the visuals should feel similar. Everything should feel like and so getting that consistency is actually hard to put 60, right?
Because each
So
city is a different landscape altogether that you're working with, from a vendor perspective, from a spatial perspective, even infrastructure for that matter, I guess.
how the government works in each market is different. How the host committee is structured, the teams, the venues, everything is different. I have a grass field in my stadium already. Most of the fields are still turf. So like, again, like making sure that the experience for all the players, all the fans, all the VIPs feels relatively consistent with its own local flair, right? They don't want me to not be the Bay Area. They don't want me to not bring Napa Valley into the experience. I should do that. It's part of who we are. But the operations should feel pretty consistent. So that one has been we've spent more time on that one because it's so different in terms of just being in the market for the first time after so long.
I completely get it. But tell me something, you talked about something really important where you said the sports experience needs to be consistent as far as the actual performance on the stage or on the field is concerned. But then there is this peripheral, very important aspect of the local culture and the local community coming into it, which is what differentiates your venue from other venues, of course. So how do you manage to balance between the two? And at least from a Bay Area perspective, how do you manage to bring culture into your events?
Yeah, the good news is the three leagues, the NBA and the NFL and FIFA all want to celebrate the local culture, right? There's a reason the Bay Area was picked, and
Yeah.
we need to bring those reasons to life, right? We have a very beautiful region. It's picturesque. People love seeing the Golden Gate Bridge. They love seeing the hills of, the East Bay and the South Bay. There's things that you see and you're like, I know where that is. And so that's part of it. We have a very diverse region. It's celebrated here that we don't all look the same, think the same, act the same. That difference is celebrated.
Yeah.
And those leagues know that the diversity actually helps them as well, because the thinking is different, because they can attract new fans, they can grow their sport. And so they want the diversity in people to come to the table and to be celebrated and to be part of who we are. And then I would say the fact that we're sitting in Silicon Valley, and there is an expectation that the experience here will be innovative, it will be different, it will be jaw-dropping.
Yeah.
That, and that the leagues can talk to companies like Salesforce, NVIDIA, Cisco,
All the big
Google,
names, those
all
big
the big
buildings you can
names.
see out there.
And not even the big corporate entities that we know about, the ones that are starting new companies, the entrepreneurs, the VCs, the private equity, like the people that are investing and starting new ideas of what we're going to be doing 10 years from now. That's who I want to bring to the table, and that's who these leagues actually want to have present. Because in order for this sport, all sports, the industry to evolve, we have to continually be innovating, and this is where we come to innovate, right? So I think it's all of these factors that will be part of the experience of the Bay. And when I sit with my team, we think about, like, why will this experience here be different? How will it be different? When you get off the plane and you land in the Bay Area, you should already be like, oh my God, how did they do that? That's the experience we want here. And so it's just part of our planning process, right? I meet with, for example, all of the different regions of the Bay, a lot of meetings with Napa. Like, how do we bring the parts of the Bay that make us who we are, and put them into the experience? That'll be what you see when you come here.
No, that's incredible. And you're right. Very unique to your space, because again, like I've seen it for myself, there are these iconic elements that come together, and a big part of that is the diversity, for sure. So that's a big thumbs up on the area. But also, very correctly said by you that it is a tech hub, it is an innovation hub as well. Is there a big role now coming in, or you foresee it coming in, of technology to play a role in hosted events? Are there technological innovations coming through in the sports space which you feel are working and making their way in progress for that wow factor also to come through, to make that engagement beyond what we're typically used to? So there is that typical stadium experience that I go, I watch a sporting events, I come out, I may have a great meal, I may have a bit of a cultural experience outside it, and that's it. How's it
Yeah,
growing beyond that? And is technology
yeah,
playing a role or not?
yeah. So yeah, the short answer is yes. The long answer is we will see in, next year and in 26 here, like what we're able to bring to the table to actually show people it can be done differently, right? Because my perspective is I want to make sure there is this almost jaw-dropping, like, oh my God, this is so cool. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Now I have to do that in a way when hundreds of thousands of people are here that it doesn't break, that we're not testing something for the first, like, so there's a balance, right, of what we do to make sure that we can get both, like we can do a really great wow, but not have something just so
Compromise.
new.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
or something
Mhm.
compromised. And I think what you'll start to see, not even just in the Bay Area, is evolution in three spaces, right? Number one, operationally, right? So how do you get to where you're going in a safe manner, but in an easier and more efficient way? The things we're thinking about are things as simple as, like, when you get off one train and you get on another, that seamless to get to the stadium or wherever you're going, that experience is not only seamless, because it's sitting on your app, what that transportation and mobility plan looks like.
Okay.
That's a very simple example. Operationally, how do I get to where I need to go in a really safe, efficient manner? There's things that have already started there, but I think this will even progress even further.
That makes sense. And tell
Yeah.
me something. What, so one was the technological aspects, plus you said that there are these big companies very unique to your area as well. What is their uptake in the sports space now? And do they also see sports as a great community-led connector for them? Or are they looking at it from a CSR lens more? Or are they genuinely finding great opportunities for brand building with sports? So where are we at, specific to the Bay Area, I was asking, when it
Yeah.
comes to corporate involvement as well?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So the short answer, of course, is yes. All of you can see a very good transition in terms of technology companies being involved and invested in sport. And you see it a lot in the in media distribution, right? So all of the broadcast rights negotiations that happened, the one that really very recently happened with the NBA, but you see this, like the Amazon Primes and the YouTubes, like you see new players in the space that maybe never were in the space before.
Yeah.
So yes, I think the second question you asked is probably the most important. A lot of these companies do not need brand recognition, right? They're not doing it to get their logo on a
Get the
sign.
logo. Not necessarily. Yeah.
They don't need it.
They don't need.
Everybody knows who Google is, right? What they're doing is trying to do one one or two things. The first is most of these companies, or many of them, are product run, and a lot of them are innovating on products.
Yeah.
And so when they need to launch a product, sell a specific product, I'm thinking about like a Google Pixel, for example, they will invest in sport around that product because the product is new, it needs to be competitive, people don't understand its features, it's trying to gain market share. So it's a product specific play that they're making, or they understand that they're headquartered in the Bay, that their employees live in the Bay, that they have a responsibility to make sure the Bay Area is successful, it's vibrant, it's thriving, because they want their community to be successful. They want their employees to be happy. They don't want to have to, right? So a lot of the companies we talk to will have those two things kind of in play. Like, how am I going to talk about a product that maybe I'm launching? How am I going to host customers to talk about the product that I want them to buy?
Yeah.
And or how am I going to be a key player in the Bay Area to show that I actually care about this community, that I want this community to succeed, that I want it to evolve, that I want to solve some of the problems that exist in this region. And so then we talk to them about that. And that's what you want out of the communities that are, or out of the companies that are headquartered here. You want them to be invested in the place that they live.
Absolutely. And I think their involvement is very important to just set the pace, and also from an economical point of view to make sure that there is that sustainability angle that comes through in the long run as well. And there's something in it for them. And I found the second reason quite interesting, where you feel that, they want to give back in the area and the community in a very micro way. I see that happening here in India when it comes to marathons, which are more on the city level and activating the local communities, and the employees' involvement of these participating corporates becomes very important as well. So I think it's a sports plus cultural play that comes through, which is beyond your typical CSR and branding, which is the usual slots that plot corporate involvement in. But there are
Yeah,
these new angles coming up.
I think it's been I've been in sponsorship for a long time now. And when I started, it was all about like awareness of my brand,
Correct.
selling the, right? Like and it was very transactional.
Mm.
And there are still companies that need to do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's exactly why you should use sponsorship. But I have seen this transition from being just transactional to, can I also do good for the area that I live, for the world? And it's been really nice to see brands take some responsibility of the environment,
Yeah.
their community, right? Worker welfare, um, just improving the lives of others. I've seen a really nice transition over the 18 years I've been in this, of brands really taking responsibility of more than just how well am I doing in my business.
Absolutely. So I think corporate involvement is a key element. Obviously, local government involvement is super important because they are literally the ones who are sort of, setting that framework for us and making it possible for us to work. Um, and I wanted to ask you how important it has been and how supportive it has been, because I think this can be an example for other areas and cities and even countries sometimes to look at sports as a very important element of building that local upliftment program, which the government needs to be involved in a deeper way, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. The bids that we put together included support from pretty much every jurisdiction in the Bay Area. Again, there are not a lot of things that will unite people,
Yeah.
let alone government, people in government that might be coming from different parties, etc. Sport
Mm.
tends to unite, right? You want to bid for the World Cup? Yes, we're all in. Let's bid for the World Cup. So, and there is no way that we could do what we needed to do here
Yeah.
without support from government, because we need the infrastructure, we need the mobility, we need public safety, we need all of that. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that our relationships with local government, state government, federal government, which is a little different, but
Mhm.
those, all of it, the relationships are strong, that we're communicating, hey, we need help, or hey, here's what they've asked us to do. How do we do this? And there's a person on my team that is dedicated to that. Is her entire job, is just to
Yeah.
make sure that we are building relationships with and communicating with government. I think that being said, we live in a region that has 9 different counties and 101 different municipalities. And, much like we talked about FIFA trying to do a tournament across 16 cities and coordinating that, that's hard. And we haven't done that many times in the Bay Area before, where all of the counties have to come together and all of the cities have to come together. And so I would say we're learning on the best ways to do that and how you bring people together. What is the frequency and cadence of communication? What are the decisions they need to be involved in versus the ones that they're like, it's okay, we trust you. So those are all things that we will learn. And I think, what we want to do as a Bay Area host committee is, once the third event in 2026 is over, we don't want to just fold and say we're done. We want to continue and bring other events into the Bay. So our goal is to sustain ourselves as an organization. And I say that to you because the work we do today to manage government, to bring them together, to set up the infrastructure on how we're going to communicate, how we're going to bid, that is going to set the stage for what we do in the future. Those processes will stay, which, again, has never been done before in the Bay Area. So that's the stuff it's almost, if you think about tech, we are a startup organization.
Yeah.
We have 3 product launches in the next 18 months, 2 years. And then we're probably going to iterate and evolve and have more in the future. And so we're trying to do 2 things. We're trying to start up and scale, and we're trying to issue product at the same time as trying to sustain an organization for the long run. That requires, that's hard.
Not little. That's a lot. And I
That's
think
hard.
it's incredible, and it sounds extremely layered and complex, the kind of role that you're playing, and so many different interventions coming in from government perspective, corporate perspective, and I would say most importantly, community perspective as well. So the last piece in the puzzle, the 1,000-piece puzzle that it is probably community, and how important it is, or do you play that direct role in activating community? How is that done?
Yeah, we talk about this in our team almost every staff meeting, which is if we only focus on operating the events, so if that's all we care about, we're actually not doing our jobs. Because the event itself should serve as a platform to do so much more in the region that we live in, right? That should just be the catalyst and the thing that gets people's attention to do the other things we need to do in the market. And so we have just actually hired our Chief Impact Officer. We will be focused in 3 different areas around impact, community impact. The first is workforce equity, right? So what are we doing to manage for economic and financial mobility in the Bay? It's an issue here, right? To make sure that people feel like they can live here, they can survive, they can make enough money, and how do you actually help people along that journey? So that's one area. The second area will be how we use sport for change. You know, if that's in the area of youth development, if that's in the area of female empowerment, how do we use the events that come here to really get change around social issues that we care about that are very specific to the Bay? And the third is all around climate and the environment. With 3 events that happen here, if we can kind of show the world that you can do this with the environment and climate in mind, if we can start to think about companies, startup tech companies that are thinking about the environment first, and we fund some of that thinking, those are the things that we actually want to do in the Bay. So you'll start to see programming that comes out of our region. And because we want to not fold and dissolve as an organization in 2026, it actually gives us more opportunity to build legacy programs versus if we were just going to shut down in 2026. If you're just going to shut down in 2026, there's actually very little that you can do.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, building a very strong foundation for everything to come, perhaps in terms of just how to blueprint it out across all of these various elements and aspects, right?
Yeah, we're trying. We are thinking about the things that are the most important for us to do, right? Which is hard when you're a startup to prioritize those things. That's a hard exercise. So we know we have to operate the events, and we have to do that in a seamless and excellent way. We have to. That's the primary job that we have.
Yeah.
But we also know that we can't just do that. We have to have impact in our community. So those are probably the 2 areas we focus on the most. And to support those 2 areas, we have, a marketing function that's like talks about what we do, that speaks to the importance role of sports, that, engages the community. And we have a revenue function because, of course, to do all these things, we need to raise some money. So those are the support functions that sit between the 2 pillars that we actually are really, really focused on doing well and doing right.
No, I think it's incredible work that you're doing. And I wish most of our country's cities can have, such accomplished people and professional people running events and running such big events, because I think it genuinely has the opportunity to have that local impact, which people don't really think through. In fact, that brings me to something I want to understand better from you on the Olympics again, which basically is coming down to the fact that there was a time when people thought the Olympics coming into a city has such a massive impact on that city. It actually brings about a lot of change. And it's more than just the sporting event coming to the city. It's a lot more than that. But from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the number of bids has declined a lot as well over the years, of the number of countries who want to host or are willing to host the Olympics, to a number which is maybe even concerning to a certain level. So where is it going in terms of hosting these big events like the Olympics, from where it was in perception to where it is now, where even the IOC at some point in time has been struggling to find ways to make it more attractive for more companies to bid for it.
Yeah, it's actually been really interesting, and I think you're seeing it sure in the Olympics, but also like how the NFL does its bid process, how the World Cup does its, everyone's changing a little bit. And I think, we released a report, a couple of months ago around the economic impact of the 3 events that are coming to the Bay, and we're projecting a conservative number of $1.4 billion. And there's always a lot of discussion amongst the economists of like, it can't be, it can't be that, or it can't. I think everyone agrees that usually and typically there is positive economic impact that comes to a region, and the discussion is usually about, is the number right or wrong? The reason the number is, I feel good about the number here, and this will get back to your question. The reason I feel good about the number here, the cost and the impact to cities that host events, the biggest cost is usually in venues.
Yeah.
New venue builds, the labor associated with, right. So all of that, and when those venues are only built for that event and not continuously used, the economic impact actually becomes nil or zero. Because the cost to put the cost to build actually offsets any of the positive gain. And so what I think, first of all, in the Bay Area, we're really lucky, right? We have great venue. I don't have to build any venues, which makes my economic impact positive.
Correct.
Right? Because there's no expense, there's very, very little expense required on making sure that we have the right facilities and infrastructure to put it on.
And that's the heaviest expense you're saying in any case.
That's the heaviest, it's usually the heaviest expense that you have to manage for. So when you go back, now let's go back to your question around the IOC. What you're starting to see from the IOC, right, is an understanding that venue expenses are likely the highest. And so to mitigate that, going to cities that have either hosted before or have existing venues from sports in their region where the venue expense goes down. And so you see that. So LA was just awarded, right? So they'll host in 28. They hosted in 84. They have great existing venues already in that city from the Olympics, and just because they're LA.
Yeah, correct.
Paris was conditionally awarded the next games, I think the winter in 30.
Yeah.
They have just hosted in 24.
So they would have
France was awarded. So you would assume have venues already where that expense. The next one in 34, I think, was just awarded to Salt Lake. Salt Lake was hosted already in 2000. They have existing venues. So I think what you'll start to see is this transition to how do we go to cities where there's not this huge expense to build, and they can just benefit from all of the tourism, all of the labor, all of the positives that come into that market. That's what I think, and FIFA was really smart in that matter, right? They came to the United States and Canada and Mexico. They're using all existing venues. No one's building a venue for the World Cup versus what they did in Qatar, what they've done in South Africa, right? Those were all new venue builds that you saw. They're not doing that here. And so you'll start to see this, I think, we'll see this transition that people are understanding that new venue builds are just not great from an environmental perspective, not great from an economic impact perspective, often delayed, right? There's concern about whether they're going to be ready in time. So I think there's an understanding, and that shift you're starting to see that shift now.
So now my last controversial question to you
is,
boy. India has had ambitions for the Olympics as well.
Yep.
And we have this problem. We don't have probably the kind of infrastructure in one place, at least. Yes, we have it in pockets for certain sports. Yes. I mean, I work with hockey, field hockey a lot, and I know that the field hockey infrastructure here is probably world class. And we've hosted about 3 to 4 World Cups here in India with 16 countries. But we can't say that about all sports. But it also then takes into the ambition for being able to do that, and the ambition to build that kind of infrastructure, which is world class across sports. So I know the ambition exists. How good an idea do you think it is, or is it a longer term vision for our country?
Listen, my roots are Indian, right? My grandparents are from Gujarat. I identify as Indian. My whole family does. My kids do. From my own kind of personal, in my heart,
Yeah.
I would love to see India get an Olympic Games. It would just be, I would just be so proud if and when that happens.
Yeah.
I think my personal belief now, seeing kind of how events need to be thought through to be successful, is to not rush it, right? You know, don't, because you want to make sure that you are ready for all of the organizational and operational details that will come, and you don't want the Olympics to be the first time that you test it. And so if sport is important to the region, which it is, sport
Did
is
it?
very important
Clearly. Yeah.
to India. You know, my hope is, as the country has this ambition to host an Olympic Games or a world-class event like that, is to start the puzzle now. Don't wait to get to an Olympic Games before you start to try to put this puzzle piece together. Build the infrastructure, because not because you want an Olympic Games, but because your country cares about sport. And think about, you know, not your 5-year plan in bidding for an Olympics, but maybe your 15-year plan.
Yeah.
Right? Because what's going to happen then is you'll not only have the right infrastructure, you'll have your athletes will be ready. Like, you don't want to have an Olympic Games and your athletes have not been training in the infrastructure so that they can compete and win. That's the most ideal scenario, is you host an Olympic Games and your athletes are ready to compete at that level and they are bringing home medals. So how do you do that? You have to start building now, and you have to think about what sport means to that region, with or without an Olympic Games, to just make sure that you are advancing your country from a sport in general perspective, and then you start getting the
And
event.
then
Like,
you naturally get there. So I don't think it's that shiny object that we need to achieve and acquire. It's the process that matters a lot,
it's
probably.
the whole saying, right? It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Start the journey, right? Like, that's the important part. You already know your region is sport crazy. I go there and it's like, it's nuts.
Yeah, it is.
So, like, take advantage of the passion that the country already has for it and start to build towards something versus focusing on the something. That's what I would do.
No, that's a great answer. And I think it's the wisest answer I've heard over the last few weeks,
Yeah.
this entire debate that's going around. But I just wanted to end with, of course, thanking you, but also hearing from you a small piece of advice for any young girl who's trying to get into sports with that limited vision at this point in time. I understand, you understand, there's a lot of opportunity out there for us, and you've opened up a brand new area in today's conversation, of course, when it comes to hosting events. But what would be your advice to young girls who want to get into sports as a career?
Can I give 2 pieces of advice?
As many as you like.
Two pieces of advice. The first is, you know, especially if you're an Indian woman and you feel like this is not the job for you because you don't see a lot of people who look like you in the industry. If you love it, this is the job for you, right? If you have passion for it, there is a way for you to be in it. But you have to have a little bit of persistence, and you have to have a little bit of, like, fight in you. And I would say, don't lose that fight. Don't lose that fight. But believe that you can do it, even if you don't see it as much as you want to see it in front of you. And then the second piece of advice is, I give this to a lot of people. This is an industry that requires a lot of work ethic and hustle. And so I tell a lot of people that, you know, I've gotten to where I am today because I'm good and I have work ethic, but I'm also lucky. And you need both of those things. You need to be lucky to be good and good to be lucky, both of those things. And so if you're going to choose this industry, expect to work hard. Things are not going to be given to you. You have to show a lot of hustle in this market, in this industry, because there are more people that want to work in it than positions that actually exist. And so you have to find ways to separate yourself and show your commitment and show your hustle. I work as hard today as I did when I first started, as hard, maybe harder.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yes.
So, you know, that's what it takes. That's what it takes to be in here.
No, absolutely. It's a growing industry, and I think even coming from India, where right now we have gotten sports into the spotlight and in focus, I think there's a huge opportunity in the future. And like you said, there's a journey to it as well. And I think we all can be part of that journey just as long as we know that these opportunities exist for us. So I
Yep.
think with that, I would like to end today's conversation. But I really want to thank you, Zaileen. Honestly, you've been extremely honest and very open with your responses. And I'm sure everyone who's watching this will get a great sense and a great benefit from what you said. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, and please keep doing what you're doing. This is so important. I'm happy to come back. I'm happy to check in. Like I'm wishing you lots and lots of success.
Super. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Zaileen. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking with her and understanding the incredible work that she does. Do tune in for more episodes as they come along. Thank you.